God, I need the cycle. Ooh.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome in on Texas Football's Friday edition of the Longhorn Livestream. Obviously, we're wrapping up the week. Busy week on ontexasfootball.com as we've all had updates coming through. All in all, ready for the weekend, guys. I hope y'all celebrated National Margarita Day a little bit yesterday. Are celebrating for the weekend as well. How are we doing?
I tried to get Bobby to celebrate it, but of course he wussed out. Look, I'm wearing my Friendswood today. It's playoff basketball time, and Friendswood's got a second-round playoff game. Look, we don't see the third round very often at Friendswood High School, so big game against Kempner tonight. So supporting my Friendswood guys here. But, yeah, big week. DJ, you and I were out on the road. I actually went and watched Hitchcock play hoops in the second round of the playoffs last night. Kelshawn Johnson, top receiver target, who will be in town April 6th. Rod, we want to hit on I know we want to hit on some of the I think it was Lance Zerline put out the 10 guys with NFL grades for him on NFL.com. So we a lot to hit on. Bobby Burton put out some great team notes on TexasFootball.com, guys, especially some talk on Trey Moore. We got into that this morning. We can expand on that this afternoon. But, man, a lot going on. And, by the way, 25 days away from spring football.
Yeah, when your football team is really good, there's a lot of headlines to cover. It turns out, right? Because then you got guys going to the draft, you're covering that, and you're covering spring ball, and you're covering, all the trend. I mean, there's a lot of, the coaching moves for the Longhorns. Still, they got a new special assistant that we got into with Chris Gilbert. He's back. Just a lot to cover. I think that's just because Longhorn fans are passionate, because when your team's really good, man, you want to know about all the details, all the ins and outs.
And here's the other thing, guys. We now care about SEC spring football. Florida Gators start spring March 6th.
Great
so
point,
not
Joe.
everybody starts on the 20th like Texas does. Yeah. Some teams are starting 2 weeks from now. So we have all that too, is that the SEC schedule. Hey, Kalen DeBoer's first spring practice at Alabama, what's that look like? I mean, the guys on Texas's schedule. Kirby Smart in the Georgia spring, right? I mean, so there's a lot to cover and a lot to care about right now if you're a Texas fan with this SEC move, because before you're like in the Big 12, I don't really want to look at the SEC. It's going to be hyped up all spring, but now you're like, all right, we're part of this. Let's go.
That's true. Great point, Jared.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we're getting excited, obviously, about the rest of the SEC, but there are some housekeeping notes that we got to take care of here. Obviously, Bobby's notes from this morning. If you haven't read them yet, go over to On Texas Football and check them out. He mentioned a couple guys that are a little bit limited right now in off-season winter conditioning workouts. Those guys are Matthew Golden, the Houston transfer, the Alabama transfer at tight end, Amari Nyblack, and Colton Vosick, who's kind of dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, it appears. The other two guys are dealing with some foot problems. So something to monitor right now. Obviously, we hope to see them on the field, especially for Colton Vosick, who we've yet to see on the field in the college football uniform just yet. He's a guy that Texas was very high on coming out of Westlake. That was a big recruitment win when you flipped him from Oklahoma. Now it's about seeing what he can do on the field, and this spring is supposed to be really big for him.
Yeah, I think here's the main thing. None of the injuries are thought to be serious, right? I mean, so boots are precautionary. DJ Campbell wore a boot, for instance, last year before a couple of games, right? On a Monday, Tuesday before games.
Mm-hmm.
So the boots are precautionary. We're not hearing anything about serious injuries. Will Texas limit some guys in the spring to be ready for next year? Highly possible or probable. But we're not saying who that is right now. But we don't think any of these injuries are thought to be serious. We're talking labrums and knees and surgeries and out a elongated period of time. So that's the good news. But yeah, Colton Vosick, I mean, we're getting to that point where every morning on the shows or every evening on the shows, people are talking about who they want to see. Who do we want to see in the spring, man? We're at that point right now. So it's an exciting time because look, 17 early enrollees. What do those guys look like coming in? Then you have the portal guys. I mean, so there's 20 plus new members of this team that are going to suit up as Longhorns for the first time here starting March 20th. So big couple of weeks ahead of conditioning as they finish off the spring conditioning under Torrey Beckton before they turn their full attention to spring football.
Yeah, I mean, injuries of any kind are, that's a test for your roster construction, right? I mean, those injuries, if Texas is a really deep team right now, And actually, it's going to make way for other opportunities for other guys to get reps, for the guys to showcase for the coaches. They're not serious injuries, so nobody should be freaking out, as you guys mentioned. But, I always look at it. Injuries are a part of football. Natural part of it just will happen. Sometimes you have the really bad injury luck where, significant positions go down, where you don't have, six backups that are capable and competent, or you have, kind of the good injury luck where you only have a few major injuries. I mean, Texas lost their starting running back this past season, right, to an injury. And that guy, how good is that guy? He's still the number one running back on everybody's board. Mel Kiper, Pro Football Focus, Matt Miller, everybody still got to miss Daniel Jeremiah, number one running back on the board, and he got injured. That's just shows you, the film speaks for itself. But I digress. Getting back to it, injuries are a part of this. Is why stacking those classes that you talk about, Jerry. You know about it, CJ too. Stacking that classes of talent is so important because the injuries will come. They're inevitable. How can your, at running back for Texas, at O-line for Texas, they had some injuries. How can your roster be able to sustain those injuries and still keep a high level of play and a certain brand of football that you want to play? I mean, that's what it's about. Texas had injuries at quarterback, but your quarterback room is stacked. That's the test for your roster in football because everybody's going to deal with injuries. It's inevitable.
And by the way, we've got a lot going on the 40 acres basketball. Obviously, I'm not on the 40 acres. They're on a plane headed to Lawrence, Kansas to play the Jayhawks tomorrow. Look, not a must-win game for Texas. You don't want at Kansas to be your must-win game. Texas needs to get to 8-10 in Big 12 play to stay in that NCAA tournament talk. I think right now they're in, but they need to get to 8-10. Home games against Oklahoma State and Oklahoma should get you to 8-10. 3 tough road games left at Kansas. Kansas had all week to prepare, which means not prepare, which means get healthy to me. Kevin McCullough hadn't been 100% for a while, missed that Texas Tech game, and you saw how much Kansas struggles offensively when McCullough's not there. I mean, they went up there and got manscaped, 79-50, right? I mean, it was bad in Lubbock. So it's going to probably be a full speed, healthier Kansas team for Texas Saturday. Then you're on the road at Texas Tech. I mean, so tough couple of road games coming up for Texas basketball, softball team, smoking the competition right now, baseball team off to a strong start as well. We're going to be taking a lot of questions from you guys today. So whenever CJ is ready for that, we'll also get out of our recruiting stops we've made this week. Like I said, the fun thing about, real quick on recruiting, the fun thing about going to high school basketball games where football recruits are playing to me, and I went to watch Hitchcock because they're number one in the state in 3A, and they whipped everybody in one state last year, and they beat Anahuac 82-50 last night and could have beat them by 100. But you sit in the stands. I was sitting fourth row. I think I was sitting fourth, fifth row, and you hear the conversations behind you. And the conversations around Kelshawn Johnson, where everybody in Hitchcock will be surprised if he's not a Texas Longhorn at some point. So there's 1,000 RPMs, crystal balls, whatever you want to say. But the Hitchcock community thinks Kelshawn Johnson will end up at Texas. That's not me putting in a pick. That's the town of Hitchcock putting in their pick. So that's what's fun about going to high school basketball games where there's football prospects is a bunch of water cooler talk at halftime. And you just hear it all. You can walk around or you can just really listen in the stands, and you hear a lot of things. And Hitchcock's picking Texas for Kelshawn.
Nice.
Certainly a positive sign, Jared. I wanted to keep it there on the recruiting side of things. You've obviously been, very high in the corner of Kelshawn Johnson since he really started coming on the scene lately. You've seen him a number of times in person, in the weight rooms, workouts, whatever it might be. Basically every environment that a recruit will go through in the high school days. On the court, what's he like? And I mean, have you seen the flexibility increase since your first time watching him?
Yeah, so I posted 3 photos from last night on OnTexasFootball.com in one of our threads that I took right there behind the bench. Look, Kelshawn he's one of those, he reminds me of a state of Florida skill guy. And it's because he's at Hitchcock, a smaller school, and he goes from football to basketball to track. So how many days does he spend in a weight room in a year, Rod? What, 10 maybe? I mean, 12? It ain't a lot, right?
Yeah,
it's not a lot. And in the summer, you play pickup ball. That's just small school life, right? And not to say he doesn't work hard and that staff doesn't do a good job. It's just different when you go from sport to sport to sport. But I'll tell you what he did in basketball. His athleticism, his quickness, his speed, his acceleration, that translates instantly when you watch him play on the defensive end, right? He plays point guard for them. They don't really have a point. But defensively, and in transition, man, you see he is I think he's a top 100 football prospect in the country and a guy that could have a long career. But he's got that wiry strength to him that's not even close to filling out. I mean, he's 5'11" and change, 165 probably, maybe 163 if you put him on the scale. But he's going to be a 180-pound guy that's going to be really strong once he gets into a college strength and conditioning program. There's no doubt. And I've said this before about him. And you talk to like the trainer at Hitchcock, you say, they all say he has no idea how fast he can be because he goes from sport to sport to sport, and he's never done any track training. They believe he could run 10.3, 10.4.
Wow.
If he has to train for track. So we'll see if but again, he's going to be late starting track this year because they're expected to go back to the state tournament. If they go back to the state tournament, you're talking March 7th, 8th weekend. So he doesn't really start track workouts to the following week. So probably won't run for 2 more weeks. So he's late getting into track. It's going to be hard for him to hit that 10.5 area, in my opinion. But if he can get down to that 10.6 area, not really training for track, coming out of basketball, pretty good sign of his upside as an athlete.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. 10.3 would be an incredible time. That's up there with just about anybody in the state that you'll see this cycle. Jerry, I wanted to keep it with you real quick. AJJ Sports had a question about Marcus Harris, obviously the wide receiver out of Mater Dei. Texas has been around in that recruitment for a little bit. What's the latest on him? What are you hearing in terms of Texas's pursuit on Marcus Harris?
Texas is recruiting Marcus Harris out of Mater Dei. The question is Texas actually going to have an out-of-state receiver in this class? I mean, I think there's a possibility to do. In the last couple of classes, you're thinking, yeah, they definitely will, right? But Decorian Moore, they're going to recruit through the whistle, the LSU 5-star at Duncanville. By the way, you want to see somebody that looks great in a track outfit, just go look at him. I mean, he's looking really good physically, guys. I mean, Rod, I don't know if you saw this. Duncanville went 40.66 in their second meet of the year in the 4x1. 40.66. And DK Moore is one of those guys. Then you have Kelshawn Johnson, Khaleke Lockett. Okay. I think Khaleke Lockett will be in April 6th. He just hasn't put out his dates. I'll be surprised if he's not. I think he'll be in Austin April 6th along with Kelshawn Johnson, right? And that's significant because KJ Lacey's coming in that weekend. So I know I'm long-winded on the answer, but I think Marcus Harris is in the conversation with Texas. I think at one point Texas led for Marcus Harris. He'll probably make that late June official visit to Texas, but Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, they're all in it. We'll see. Is Texas going to have an out-of-state receiver in this cycle? I think it's going to be interesting to see. Jamie French, the 5-star out of Jacksonville Mandarin. I spoke with somebody in Jacksonville I've known for years that's connected in the high school and college football world out there. And they think, talking to Jamie French's circle, that he's planning to visit this spring. So he's the high-end athlete at the wide receiver position and at wide receiver period in the 25 cycle. But it's going to be interesting as me to see if Texas actually has a out-of-state receiver in this class.
And we've talked about, kind of the accumulation of talent at each position that we've seen under Sarkisian. Going back to Bobby's notes from this morning, talking about Trey Moore and his kind of professional approach to winter workouts so far during his time on the 40 acres. I think we can all kind of agree, that's been a sigh of relief. Could you really count on Trey Moore stepping into the Texas roster right now and saying, all right, he's going to be ready physically and to, the speed perspective of things at this level of football? We have yet to see him obviously in pads, but the early returns from Bobby were certainly very encouraging this morning, just about how he goes about his business. Obviously the returns on the field, very encouraging so far. Rod, I wanted to pin this question to you because, when you start having, guys at each position that, compete day in and day out, I mean, one, how does it really help the entire ecosystem of that defensive side of the ball? But from a more positional approach, what's the day-to-day like knowing that you're in a room right now with 4 or 5 guys that are going to be pushing you in winter conditioning, spring football, and in summer camp again before putting on the pads one final time to go into the season?
Sark's been using that term obsession a lot, right? Obsession. It forces obsession if you want to win that job. Right, I was in a room with a Quentin Jammer and a Nathan Vasher. Later on, a young, Michael Huff, a young Cedric Griffin. Those guys, I mean, they were hungry and they were really talented. And it drives you, really to a different level of work ethic. And like I said, it's a borderline obsession. So my goal was to stay, to stay after practice. And then Nathan Vasher is like, "Hey man, can I see after practice get some of that work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're my teammate. Let's do it." I'm also competing with him. So when I'm trying to stay even longer. So when we go back in, I'm trying to go to the weight room. I'm trying to go watch some film because I'm trying to do extra. Right. And then you can push each other to that extent. And I remember that happening with me and my man, Nasty Nate. I remember that being the case because he was such a great player. He was unbelievable. And yeah, I was paranoid about my spot. I should have been paranoid about my spot. Right. And I think that force that starts to develop within the competition of a room. I think it's happened at Texas at the running back position, right? When you start to have so many high-level NFL caliber guys in one room who all have that borderline obsessive mindset about winning that spot. My man Ahmad Brooks lost his spot and then wanted back at another job. He was so obsessed about it. He lost his cornerback spot because me and Quentin Jammer ended up winning that spot, and then he ended up winning a spot at safety when he originally came here and started as a corner. But it was there when you get to that point where everybody in that room essentially has an NFL ceiling. That's where we were at that time. And I think, that's the hope for every room on the 40 acres, right? That you get to a point where you're stacked so many classes that all these guys have NFL ceilings. Ultimately, that pushed me to be an all-conference player and an All-American because I had to do more than these other great players that were around me and behind me. And Coach Akina, he used to set it up where in the DB room, you would sit in the front as a starter, and then the backups would sit behind you, and then so on and so on. And trust me, there were a couple of times in there, and it is mentally devastating when Coach Akina goes, No. I need your guys to switch spots. Oh, man. And you walk in there every day thinking to myself, I don't want that moment to happen to me. So you come in early, you stay late, you work your butt off in that room, and you want to establish that kind of competitive culture all throughout the team. We were brothers. There's no doubt. I love those guys, but I'm a competitor, and we were competing against each other, and that was my spot. And no matter who came in that room, they just want the way they turn. That's my spot. I'm going to earn it. I'll put in more work than you. I'll perform and execute at a higher level to make sure that I can keep that spot. And we had that competitive mentality. And you're right. It just pushes every position group to be the best they could be. And then when those position groups start going against each other, you get to the point where the practices are easier than most of your games. Now, you're going to the SEC, so that's not going to always be the case. It'll probably be easier than 70% of your games, but you're going to get such great talent in practice that you don't see talent like that with stacked rosters week to week. You see it when you play at Georgia. You see it when you play at Michigan. You're going to see it when you play, teams like that, right? Then you'll see teams with rosters, Oklahoma, but you don't usually see that, and that's where you want to get to. And there are 4 or 5 teams across the country that have that luxury and that benefit of the practices being much tougher than most of their games.
By the way, Cameron, he had one of the funniest comments in our chats of all time. So Cameron Parker, that was funny. You don't bring it up. Don't bring it up, but it was pretty funny.
Hey.
Hey, Rod, AJK Sports has a question I want you to address because while you're talking about it. Which DB currently at Texas do you think has the highest NFL upside potential?
Oh, that's good. It's hard not to say now Derek Williams.
Derek Williams and let you go from there.
I'm about to say it's hard not to say Derek Williams. It's just it's really tough. I mean, Janae Barron's an NFL player. McCool's an NFL player. But if you're talking about upside, that if this guy reaches his potential, what they're capable of, he's a guy that can win the Thorpe, right? He's a guy that could be in that rarefied air. I think he can cover like a corner. I think you can play him at nickel, and I think his skill set would translate really well. But coverage skills like that at safety, oh man, yeah, you can make in the NFL. You really can make a whole lot of money, and you can get drafted high as a safety if you can prove you can cover and make plays on the ball. And I think this year you're gonna see him make more plays on the football too. So hard not to say Derek Williams. I love me some Malik Muhammad though too. I'm a big fan of his natural man-to-man coverage skills. He's long, he's rangy. Yeah, exactly. He's long, rangy. That's a guy that, if he reaches his ceiling, he can be a day 1 or 2 guy in the draft. I think he's got that kind of ceiling on him. Whether these guys reach the ceiling, ultimately, that's about what we talked about the previous rant I just had, right? What's the work ethic? How much time are they putting in? How much film study they putting in? How obsessed they are with their technique, with the perfect rep, with becoming a student of the game, all those things. That's why Terrence Brooks, I won't sleep on him either, because I've met his dad, who is a footwork coach who also played ball at the college level, played in the league. There's something about that pedigree, him being an old soul. He could take a leap this year. The secondary should be a strength this year. If it's not, I'm going to be very disappointed. It is the only position group, offense, defense, or even special teams, that hasn't improved dramatically since the day Sark got here. Every other position group, D-line, linebacker, running back, quarterback, wide receiver, O-line, you name it. Jeff Banks been doing a great job. You name it. Every group has gotten better. You can't really say that secondary's gotten dramatically better, because I think it was one of the last phases of roster construction for Texas. I think evidenced by the last recruiting class with 5 DBs, and you're bringing in Makuba too. Look at what the liability on defense was for Texas, right? Pass defense. That was one of the big ones. Pressure too, but pass defense. I think they're just addressing it. I think they found out, like some coaches do earlier than others, there's some things you just can't coach. You got to recruit them. They're recruiting coverage now. They're recruiting coverage skills. They're recruiting foot speed back there. There's like, we can't coach that. We tried to in the secondary, and it didn't work. We were able to coach up the linebackers. We were able to coach up the D-line. These are guys we inherited that are now going to the NFL, play at a high level for you. This coaching staff can develop. There's not a doubt. But there's just some things you don't want to try to develop that. It's going to take you too long. And coverage is one of them. They're recruiting that now.
Hey,
Rod, I'm right there with you with the Derek Williams love. I feel like he's the easy guy to point to. I actually liked what AJJ Sports said again. I mean, I feel like Terrence Brooks a little bit gets overlooked.
I agree.
But to your point, Texas is adding another piece to this secondary, and Andrew Makuba, who, we talked about it a little bit. The way too early mock drafts had him kind of in that 3rd or 4th round. He wanted to return for another year, boost that stock a little bit. I'll ask both of you guys, because I think it'll be an interesting exercise here. When you add someone like Andrew Makuba to this safety room, what's a good year for him? Because he's accomplished some pretty successful things already in his college career. Now he's joining a secondary in which, as we've talked about, wasn't necessarily the strength and might be lagging a little bit behind in terms of positional production for this program right now. When you add Makuba to this group at the end of the year, how could you kind of evaluate and assess a good year for him as a Texas Longhorn?
I don't think I'll start here. I'll let Rod get from a technical standpoint, but I'm not going to start with a stats number on him at all. I think this comes down to, does Texas end up in a college football playoff? And can you look at that position as being a big reason Texas took a big step at the safety position in the secondary? And that was part of moving into the SEC, still ended up in the college football playoff. Yeah. I think I'm the believer of, if you're really good players, we talked about before last year, if you're really good players, have really good seasons, that means you won a lot of games, right? We talked about it before the season. If Quinn had a decision to make, if the D-line guys' draft stock went up, if Worthy and Mitchell and Sanders were being talked about as 1st, 2nd round guys, if all those things happen, Texas will have had a really good season. Yeah, I think we're looking at the same. And Makuba is an experienced guy, 3 years starting Power 5 football. He's played in big games. He's had big expectations. If he comes in as part of a safety position secondary that ascends, not to be one of the tops in college football, I'm not saying that, but just from last year to 24, then I think that's going to be very positive.
Yep. No, I agree with that. I think you're right, Jerry. I think it's the overall improvement of the secondary, right? We're just looking at them as an overall unit to improve in their coverage, pass defense, and splash plays, making more plays on the football. The coaches have, it's kind of there's a long old school football debate about, in the NFL anyway, where there's a salary cap league, what matters more, pressure or coverage? Because you can't necessarily have both. I mean, if you draft really well, maybe you can get it, right? Cowboy, the top 5 defense in the NFL, maybe to do it. But for most teams, they got to choose in investing in one or the other. And, different teams, I mean, Belichick was a coverage guy, right? He didn't invest in pressure, invested in coverage. Kyle Shanahan, he invested in pressure, always drafting D linemen, always acquiring D linemen. So it can be done a number of different ways. And I think for Texas, what they're trying to figure out is because they've been getting pressure, guys. They've been getting actual pressure. The pressure has not converted into a lot of splash plays. In terms of pressure, they've been top 10 pressure defense the last 2 years in creating pressure in the Power 5, but has it converted into splash plays, turnovers, takeaways? Has it converted into sacks and a lot of tackles for loss? It has not. They're trying to figure out how to bridge that disconnect right now. And now I think with the secondary playing better coverage overall, I think you may end up having some of that. Now the pressure will be coming from the edges and not from the interior, and maybe that was it different.
Rod, that was led me to the question. Tie it all together. Bobby's report on OnTexasFootball.com. You can go read that on Trey Moore. Okay. To your point, Texas has got PFF pressures the last 2 years. But there's a difference between that and getting guys to the ground, first of all, or two, pressure affecting timing of throws and accuracy of throws. Tie that all together for the fans watch it, and how important Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill in year 2 is to the success of the secondary.
Yeah, throw Ethan Burke on there too, right? Throw Ethan Burke on there. And I honestly, it kind of reminds me of my time on the 40 acres. Remember, I had Sean Rogers and Casey Hampton early on in my career, and it made a huge difference in the time that I spent in coverage because I knew, hey, nobody can block those guys for more than 2 seconds. If I'm good to line of scrimmage, I really ain't got to worry about the route down the field. That guy's not going to throw a clean ball. We lost those guys, and then our defense was still good, but it transitioned from being a defense that was built from the outside in. We had a young Corey Redding out there, started recruiting guys like Derek Johnson, started building with speed. We had Quentin Jammer, who ended up being a top 10 pick in the league. We were built from the outside in and coverage. I think that's the hope for this group here, is that's how they're going to be constructed. And to your point about the edges, you want natural pass rushers. I always say that's another thing you can't really coach. You can get better at it, but some guys are just natural pass rushers, man. They got the lean, they got the hip bend, they really kind of get the leverage and the angles, power to speed transition. And Trey Moore, I'm telling you, he's one of those guys. He's a natural pass rusher. If you put him in pass rush situations, you got a Colin Simmons who is just a freak edge, right? He translates everything to be an NFL caliber edge guy. I love that you brought up Anthony Hill. Remember, Sark said Anthony Hill was one of their best pass rushers. He said like second best pass rusher behind Byron Murphy on the team. You got to keep that guy. Yes, because he was a freshman, right? Because natural pass rushers are natural pass rushers. So I think now, and you're expecting a leap from Barron Sorrell, expecting a leap. I think Ethan Burke's got some of that natural pass rushing ability. It may be different if you get that pressure coming from the edge. I wonder if you can game plan in terms of the leverage you're playing in the secondary about where you're going to flush and where you're going to flush quarterbacks and where you're going to collapse that pocket, instead of having quarterbacks be able to keep plays alive by getting to the perimeter and extending the play. Maybe now you're collapsing that pocket from the edge, forcing that quarterback up, and then now you can start blitzing and up the interior gaps and really collapse the pocket as a whole and make a quarterback's life hell trying to navigate the pocket and also make accurate throws down the field. And we know they want to play more bump and run coverage, so they want to shrink the passing windows, make the quarterback's life difficult by pressuring them, collapsing the pocket from the edges, but also shrinking those passing windows and not giving up easy throws, which they gave up way too much last year.
No doubt. I'm right there with it. Hey, I wanted to stick on this defensive topic because I think we got the ball rolling here a little bit. We had a question from Football Junkie here. I think the defense has 3 or 4 young guys drafted that could be top 5 players at their position when it's time for their draft year. I think we can all point to Derek Williams as one of them, Anthony Hill in that conversation right now. In y'all's opinion, who else might be able to jump into that elite category right now? Does Texas have anybody on the defensive line that could, eventually have a ceiling that you're looking at a day 2, maybe day 1 pick eventually down the road? Colin Simmons, we've yet to see him, but what do y'all think about in terms of Football Junkie's question here?
It's good.
It's a good question.
It makes you think a little bit.
Yeah.
On Friday, I don't want to do that.
I think how much stronger Ethan Burke gets will tell his story. How Colin Simmons plays against the run will tell his story. But Colin Simmons is an edge rusher with his length. Absolutely has that ability. I don't think there's any question. Does Malik Muhammad, Rod, or will that come down to what he runs in the combine? Because coverage skills, I think he's there. Is it going to come down to how fast he runs in workouts, combine, and things like that? But Anthony Hill, obviously one of those guys. I think what's fun about a question like that is somebody's going to emerge from this 23 class or this 24 class. 4 class hadn't even hit the field. A lot of them in for spring. 23 kids. There's so many kids who haven't had their opportunity yet. Where offensively, it's a little easier to point to some of those guys. I think defensively, you got so many guys that are coming up right now. It's kind of hard to pin 5 guys down, in my opinion.
Yeah. If Derek Williams wasn't playing a position like safety, they don't like drafting safeties really high. It's weird. So if you can be top 5 at that position, doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to be a first or a second round pick. I think the guys in the secondary need more splash plays. They need more of those havoc plays, whether it be interceptions, hands on the football. You got to get your hands on the football. That's what the NFL values, guys that can get their hand. Everybody's going to get beat. It's just going to happen. You play long enough, you're going to get beat. There's some film out there of Rod B getting toasted. That's going to happen. But what I want to see from my DBs is you make more plays on the ball than you give up. And I think should be the goal of the secondary. And we're going to make more plays than we give up on the football. And I think that this group can do that. I mean, I really do overall.
Definitely. All right, time to switch gears a little bit. And Juan, I'm sorry I overlooked your super chat. I'm manning the gears today. I feel like a first-time pilot flying solo a little bit, so bear with me,
man,
if you don't mind. But thank you for the super chat. Obviously, that's big time. Jerry, this is for you, and it's timely now. Obviously, Texas made a big addition back to their recruiting staff not too long ago this week. But Jerry, does Texas have a recruiter that is a great H-town? What is that Houston presence that Tom Herman kind of made a strong attempt to go after? Obviously, we know that Texas has some great success in Dallas. We've talked about it time and time again. You add Chris Gilbert to the mix, you only can assume that group will be even stronger moving forward. But Jerry, tell us about what type of presence and who on the staff right now has those deep connections to the greater Houston area, which we've known can really produce some talent.
Your guy that volume recruits and hits schools down there is Blake Gideon. Does a really good job. He actually has a big coverage area. When you talk about starting down in Galveston on the island and working your way up, then and up in Missouri City at Hightower, right? Shadow Creek, all those areas. That's a pretty big coverage area in the Houston area. So he's doing a great job. Fort Bend, Marshall, all those schools. He's doing a great job in the volume recruiting, being out as much as he can per NCAA rules, which as long as we can talk about NCAA having rules and NCAA anymore, but he does a great job there. But when Jeff Banks pops up in Houston, you're kind of like, oh, okay, because he has that North Houston area, but he's also more of a spot recruiter, right? So the fact that he's been to Decaney twice to see Nick Townsend and Tuna Kynes, but Nick Townsend, right, who could be that edge/tight end recruit. When Jeff Banks starts popping up, you're like, okay, that's a little different if you're a Texas fan following a kid's recruitment. Does Texas have one guy there? I can't point to one guy there. I don't believe in rainmakers in recruiting anymore because the NIL's your rainmaker in recruiting. So I think it's kind of like even if Tim Brewster was in recruiting in the Houston area for Texas right now, NIL still changed the game. Tim Brewster, he didn't lose many battles. You can lose a battle now and you do a great job. So, like, to be clear, I'm not sure rainmakers matter in recruiting as much as I think it's actually the guys who are really due diligent in terms of establishing the right relationships with people, right? And continuing that over a period of time at schools, because that's not always the head coach. That could be that could be the trainer there. That could be the counselor. That finding that right person and maintaining those relationships to have the information is still the key in recruiting. But the rainmakers just go in and get it done anymore. That game's changed.
Yeah. You gotta make it rain.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Jerry, to your point, it was interesting whenever Texas was getting out on the road to go see their 25 commits, who was joining them on those trips. It was Tashard Choice. It was Jeff Banks going with Steve Sarkisian as well. And that was to go see Brandon Baker out of Florida and Emory Winston out of Georgia. So
a closer. They basically got a close. They bring a closer with them.
But yeah,
Hey, if those are the two guys you got warming up in the bullpen, you got some pretty good arms right there. So that's encouraging.
An eighth and a ninth inning guy. So you saw Tashard Choice. You saw Tashard Choice with an expanded role. The fact that he's at Louisville High with Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian to see Michael Fasusi, 5-star offensive tackle. Okay, you're starting to see Tashard's his role expand with Steve Sarkisian. That is something to take note of, right, CJ?
Absolutely. And I wanted to go back to spring football because it's coming, like you said, Jerry, only 25 days away. It's coming close. And we've got a couple questions here. We'll start with this one from Stephen Henderson. How's Jelani McDonald doing? I mean, winter workouts, he's been a guy that has a lot of intrigue around him, obviously from the versatility side of things. I saw him a number of times in high school at Connolly, also in the All-American Bowl practices where it felt like he was anywhere he wanted to be in that back seven of a defense, and he was making plays. And so we talked about it in the offseason a little bit. Coach Choate taking the job at Nevada, I think there were some happy faces a little bit in that coaching office because the battle for where Jelani McDonald would end up ultimately now points in favor of Blake Gideon in the safeties room. That's where we know he was in bowl preparation for the Washington game. Jelani's going to be an interesting cat, and can he crack that too deep is really the big question when you talk about Xavier Phil-Smith coming in, Jordan Johnson-Rubel filling in, obviously the addition of Andrew Makuba, and also the return of Jahdae Barron. What's a good year for Jelani McDonald look like, starting with spring football?
I'll say this about him. This is why I think that patience is so key. Small school guy that played quarterback, right? Kind of a jack of all trades. Those guys take time. So last year he was learning a singular position, no different than Darian Gillette, for the first time in his really focusing on one position for an extended period of time. This was the first time for him doing that. So that is a big transition year. So this spring he should be more comfortable. But Rod, my question to you was, when Jelani McDonald was recruited, you could say, okay, in the Big 12, if you were looking at him as a Big 12 player, and you knew Texas was going to the SEC, but when you looked at him as a prospect, you said, okay, that'd have been a guy that Gary Patterson would have moved the linebacker in the Big 12 at TCU. But Texas is going to the SEC, so that's a little different for him. Safety skill-wise, what's going to be key for him to be able to play safety at the Power 5 level in the SEC?
Well, for Texas, it's going to be coverage. I mean, Texas wants safeties that can cover now. That's pretty obvious. The guys they're recruiting, a young Derek Williams, and nothing against, guys that aren't necessarily coverage specialists, like a Taft Daddy. Taft Daddy makes plays out there for you. He can kind of be a stabilizing force out there for you. But I think Texas wants to prioritize that, and that's what you need in the NFL. The SEC, they play big boy football. You need safeties that can cover. If not, they're going to be exposed. And they can be exposed by formation. Think about this with Texas, right? Texas. This is why Makuba coming in is so big. When you had safeties out there that weren't coverage specialists necessarily, they were good players, but Jaron Thompson and Taft Daddy out there and Keaton Crawford, they could be exposed in coverage. And a lot of teams would run formation into the boundary because Texas didn't travel their nickels. So that was an easy way to get a safety matched up one-on-one and just be able to get at that guy. We saw Oklahoma State do a lot of that, right? With, was it Presley they have in the slot there? We saw them do that a lot. 3-by-1 sets where you can get a safety isolated on that number 3 receiver a lot of times. We've seen that, or that the tight end. Sometimes they'll have a tight end on the backside of a 3-by-1 set, and then they'll try to expose safeties in coverage that way. We've seen Texas be exposed just formationally a lot of the times with their safeties. You won't have that if you got a guy that can cover. So I think for Jelani McDonald, any of those safeties, if you can't cover, it's going to be hard for you to see the field.
I think with the Jelani, it's also worth mentioning where he was previously committed to before Texas came in late. It was Oklahoma State. And Jerry, you mentioned TCU is very good at going out and finding talented defensive backs. Oklahoma State doesn't necessarily view defensive backs as a singular position anymore. You talk about the positionless, the versatility. They find lengthy guys that they can throw anywhere on their defense. Right now, it's Kendall Daniels who's really making headways in the NFL conversation. Cam Smith is another guy. A.J. Green, the old cornerback, is another guy that you can point to and say, you know what, these guys they like the length, they like the opportunity for them to throw big time bodies around versatily in that defense right now. But I wanted to get to Bengals comment.
Bengals entered the chat.
It sure has. Texas should go out and get a safety in the transfer portal. There was a guy from Arkansas a few years ago. That was pretty good. I think we all know where you're going with this one, Bengal. And we were hoping that iron made sharper iron with him, obviously. But, it just didn't necessarily work out with Jalen Catalon. But good to see you, Bengal. Thanks for hopping in and chatting with us this Friday. We got a lot more questions to go, and keep getting your questions in. We got 20, 30 more minutes on this one. Right now, I wanted to get to Ryan Wingo because Connor's got a question about Ryan Wingo, the 5-star wide receiver that's joining the Texas room right now. I've heard tremendous things about Ryan Wingo so far.
Well, I'm different. I've heard he's been terrible, and y'all should forget about him.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, he's terrible. Can't play at all. Done. We'll be at Prairie View A&M in a year.
But no, back to Ryan Wingo. I mean, we've talked about Xavier Filsaime a little bit, in terms of what he's brought to the defensive side of the ball already as an early enrollee. Yeah. Ryan Wingo, and this really started for me whenever I saw him down in San Antonio again. He's built differently on the offensive side of the ball.
Yes.
He is spectacular for his size and the way that he moves. It's so fluid. He can really find separation whenever he's out in routes. That was my biggest question mark for him out of high school, is would he be able to gain separation from guys who share similar athletics, to him, the speed, the agility, the burst. Would that rather be one of those guys that you can really separate from? He was not covered at all. And I think that when the pads come on this spring, you'll see him in the rotation very quickly, at least until Silas Bolden arrives, when things start really crowding up once again, once a veteran coming in with a lot of production.
Well, I'll tell you where a guy like Wingo has a real opportunity. And this morning, somebody asked on Coffee and Football, could he have a Xavier Worthy freshman year? And the answer to that's no, because Xavier came in at a time where Texas didn't have anybody at the receiver position.
Needed him,
and he had to go produce big numbers. It's good news for Ryan Wingo. He's not coming into that situation. He's actually coming into a situation with Isaiah Bond and Silas Bolden and Matthew Golden and Jonte Cook in year 2. Yes, UT boy, Jonte Cook. But where I think Ryan Wingo has a chance to impact winning, and he'll play, but where really has a chance to impact winning, Rod, can he become a red zone guy? With that frame and that vertical ability and that explosive ability, can he be a red zone guy? I mean, that somebody has an opportunity there, unless Sark gets really creative and lines Nyblack out at wide receiver in the red zone or something like that. I think Wingo's going to have a chance there. Now, that takes nothing away from what he's going to be in the future. I think he's a big-time talent. Look, I've said this before. He's a more talented prospect than A.D. Mitchell was coming out of high school. And A.D. Mitchell's about to go second round of the NFL draft. So that's how high a ceiling Ryan Wingo has. People have asked about him hitting 22 miles an hour already. But look, Ryan Wingo, he went to Texas being able to hit 22 miles an hour if he's healthy. He ran 10.5, 10.6 as a junior in high school. If you're hitting that number, you're hitting 22 miles an hour on catapult or whatever.
Yeah, no, he kind of reminds me of honestly, kind of a mini Roy Williams. I'm not gonna lie, because he doesn't play as big as he does, but he's better with the ball in his hands. But just the freakish combination of athleticism, explosivity, and speed at that size.
That's
it. When when you see it, it just don't even look right when you see somebody that big that be able to move that quickly and get in and out of breaks. Like, honestly, watching the more film I watched on him, I said, man, the combination of all those things, of all that in terms of the skill set, reminded me of Roy Williams. Not necessarily the playing style, but just seeing that type of freakish size, the combination of the speed and the agility. I'm with you. I mean, I don't see how he doesn't see the field. That's the case, guys, we're talking about. And shout out to my man CJ, who wrote a great article over at On Texas Football about the receivers, breaking down the new guys coming in, transfer portal, and Jonte Cook. God, we're talking about 5 guys seeing the field in at least significant reps at the wide receiver position. That would be Sark, expanding that circle of trust I talk about a wide receiver. And by the way, I am predicting that he is going to do it, because I've watched Ryan Wingo too. I don't see how he doesn't see the field, knock on wood, unless there's something that outside of his control.
Yeah, that that wide receiver conversation is interesting. I did do the deep dive earlier on Texas football. If you are interested in some of the deeper numbers that we saw from last year, go ahead, go check that out because there's some interesting takeaways there. Yeah. The number one thing to me was kind of Matthew Golden's usage in Houston's offense. And I think we can all kind of expect a different usage here at Texas. We talked about, again, the versatility of this group. They all have similar skill sets and traits that they bring to the field. But Matthew Golden was only targeted about 8 yards down the field in Houston's offense last year. He was more of an underneath kind of shallow cross guy or quick screen guy. What kind of changes will Texas and Sarkisian use with Matthew Golden obviously going alongside of Ryan Wingo, a Cook, a Bond, Bolden? Where does he kind of find his mold as well? Because, the hands weren't great compared to who else Texas was bringing in. What kind of jumps, development, et cetera, can you expect this year with Chris Jackson taking over the molding of Matthew Golden? It'll be interesting to watch, but a really fun article that I was really glad I was able to dive into earlier this week to kind of give a broader perspective of how these guys might be used. But man, it'll be fun. And hey, we're forgetting a guy, DeAndre Moore.
We are.
UT boys definitely entered the chat now. Okay. What?
That's a big claim right there.
Wow. Is he?
Those are 5 boys.
What's the track time? What's the track time of both these guys?
He ran 10.8 in high school. I do know. Remember, he ran 10.8. So
right.
I think DeAndre is such a smooth mover running routes that he is kind of under the radar fast in a way, deceptive fast. He's such a smooth guy. Yeah. In and out of cuts and just getting into he's the smoothest route runner Texas has. I mean,
definitely.
He just
and I think you see
those guys don't sometimes they're deceptive fast, right, Rod?
Yeah. Well, just because they know angles to the football, their releases are usually really efficient releases off line scrimmage, and they know how to get your hips turned, which is ultimately the goal of a wide receiver's release. They're trying to get those hips turned one way, so they know exactly how to work you.
Jared, would you classify Matthew Golden as another guy that's kind of savvy in his route running? He's not a guy with that elite 10.5 speed, but you watch the tape and you're like, he's got some wiggle to him.
Same 10.8 guy in high school. I think I saw him run 10.83 his junior year at track meet at Klein Kane. Same guy, speed wise. He's got some power to him in his lower body. He's not a running back after the catch, but he's got power in his game after the catch. So I think Sark's going to give him an opportunity in this scheme to have more of those chances or opportunities. And I think that's going to be really beneficial for Matthew Golden.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting, to see how this wide receiving room is used. Obviously, Sarkisian, a lot of toys now, a lot of pieces. It'll also be interesting to see who of this group stands up as a leader. And going to Jason Wason's comment earlier, who's looked the best so far through strength and conditioning? We've just mentioned Trey Moore earlier. Xavier Filsaime stood out. Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons has added 20 pounds. Among the freshmen, those guys have really stood out. What about captains? Who are these leaders that are going to step in for, a Byron Murphy, Devondre Sweat, Jalen Ford, Jonathan Brooks, Jordan Whittington? Right now, it's, this is the time where you really start hearing about guys emerging. Jerry, have you heard anything behind the scenes that?
I'll say this on a room. I've heard the running back room looks tremendous and has in workouts, and that for me is not really a surprise.
No,
Jarrett Gibson kind of showed up in Austin already a man. Christian Clark is people that aren't familiar with high school in Arizona. You have to go through a lot of hoops to be an early graduate in high school in the state of Arizona. And the fact that Christian Clark made it happen tells you he's a focused guy, right? So we know Trey Wisner has been a focused guy since he got to Austin. Cedric Baxter obviously is a focused football player. He came in and was light years ahead in pass pro. I think Jaden Blue, what happened to him the last half of the year, he got that taste in his mouth that, now I got something in front of me where year one was really tough. And he thought about hitting the portal. So, and had decided to at one point. But, that room is looking really good headed into spring ball. Savion Red obviously has that running back body type, but I think that room is healthy. I think for captains on the team, I think Anthony Hill wants to be one of those guys. I think he has that want to, and I spoke with somebody at Denton Ryan about that over the weekend on Sunday. Anthony Hill's really a focused guy. And he has been since he showed up, and he's just as focused now after the success he had as a freshman. Those guys who don't, they call it read press clippings, whatever you want to say. Those guys who keep ascending and don't really level off and understand what this is all about, maximizing their talent, I think have a chance to rise as a younger player, Rod, and become a leader.
Yep. I love the Anthony Hill one too. Talking to him, we did third and Longhorn and got a chance to talk to Anthony Hill. So he's actually looking forward to that role. So that's, it's something that he actually is looking forward to. Jahdae Barron should be a leader. I mean, Jahdae Barron and Makuba coming in. I know Makuba doesn't have the familiarity with the roster, so he doesn't have those relationships with the guys, but Jahdae Barron does. He's been here a long time with those guys. He's a guy that could have went to NFL, but came back to increase his draft stock. The second, and this is a guy that talks about wanting to be a coordinator, right? He wants to be he didn't say he wanted to be a head coach. He said he wanted to be a coordinator, right? He wants to be about ball, all right? And he's about ball. He watches a lot of film. He's got a really high football IQ. That guy should be a leader in that secondary. I remember I couldn't wait for that secondary to be my secondary. It's my secondary. We operate the way I want to. We're going to watch film and making sure that everybody watches film. On this time, I'll organize the workouts. I'm the one giving the pregame speech. I wanted that. All right. And I wanted to be able to measure my secondary up against every other secondary in the country and the secondaries prior to that. So I'll say Jahdae Barron. I'll throw him out there, man. It's time for him. The O-line, I mean, Kelvin Banks at this point, talk about leading by example, and the guy's a leader. I don't know how much of a vocal leader he wants to be, but everybody on that team respects Kelvin Banks. So he should definitely be one of those guys. Everybody knows he's going to get drafted real high. He's been playing at a high level since he was a freshman. I remember them dudes, man. Them Corey Reddings of the world came in as old souls. You know what I mean? Almost came in as, guys who were ready for the leadership role, that seemed mature beyond their years. I've met Kelvin Banks a couple of times. That's him. Even as a freshman, guys seem mature beyond his years. And sometimes that's, things you have to go through in life or whatever. But he reminds me of those guys. And now that he actually is a veteran player, he should definitely be a leader. Jake Major should be a leader. Yeah.
And of course, Quinn Ewers.
Hey, by the way, so I've had somebody asked where I'm at. I'm like, right now. So I'm going to pick up my camera and I'm going to walk and we're going to see who can pick out where I'm at. It shouldn't be hard, but while you guys talk about something real quick. I rarely do this, but I'm doing this today. Hold on. This is for all you Texas fans out there. Where am I at today? Let's see. Where am I at?
Oh, I kind of reckon. Oh, is he in like the student? No.
Who's got it? Who's got it?
Oh, really? What? Hold up. TJ.
I'm at TJ's facility. We were catching up today over in Missouri City.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was like, Willow Ridge. Willow Ridge, H-Town.
Yeah. So cool. Whoever asked, there you go. That's where we're at today.
That is so freaking cool.
We got some requests for you to start blogging, Jerry.
I'm no DeAndre Robinson, guys.
No, that is badass. That's nice. That's a nice humble brag right there. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, perfect. I did want to ask, while on the topic of leadership, Quinn Ewers, obviously, that's one of the last pieces we want to see more of. Rod, when it comes to the quarterback being a leader in your program, and this will segue us into Zerline's, Longhorns in the NFL here in a bit. But for Quinn, how important is it for the quarterback of your program and your team to be that guy with the voice? And how does that kind of project him into eventually being an NFL caliber guy?
Oh yeah, if someone's going to draft you to be the face of the franchise, which is essentially what you're drafting a guy in the first round to be, and we are projecting Quinn to be a first round guy, you want to see he's got the ability to be a leader of men, right? That he can lead and inspire men, lead, inspire, and motivate them. There's a great documentary. What is it? I think it's on Apple Plus about the Patriots. And a lot of the guys on there were talking about, how they worked for the Patriots, but they played for Brady, right? It's like they worked for Belichick, but played for Brady because Brady was our guy. And you do, as a quarterback, you almost have to take it as that it's a burden at times, but that role and that responsibility to have a connection with everybody on the team, because everybody wants to be connected to the quarterback, right? I mean, you are the field general out there, and you have to embrace that role. Like I said, it's a lot on guys. I remember my boy Sims, making sure that he spent some time with the walk-ons, and making sure, oh man, I got to go to dinner with the O-line. Oh man, I got to make sure I go hang out with the D-line, man. So I got to go kick it with my man Corey Red. We'll kick with Big Sean in case it's crazy, but you actually do as a quarterback have to do those things. You got to be close to everybody on the team. Otherwise, guys will be like, man, I don't really like that guy. You don't have a relationship with him. So that's like I said, it's a lot on a quarterback. And he's the guy now that's got to organize all the workouts. And one thing about leadership, Kobe Bryant said it best, it's confrontational.
Yeah.
And some guys have a problem with this part of it. My boy Sims did not. He still doesn't. He's talking trash about NFL players now, about he giving his opinion. Guys at the Super Bowl came up to him, guys. I won't say what NFL players, but he got approached multiple times by NFL players like, hey man, I heard what you said about me. Like they got face to face about this kind of stuff. And Sims did not back down, by the way. He's like, nah, man, I said what I said. All right, I'll back it up with this. But either way, like I said, leadership, you're going to be a leader, especially at a natural leadership position. You got to be confrontation. You're going to have to hold other guys accountable. You're going to have to make sure that, at times, if somebody needs to be called out, the way to call them out. Maybe it's something you can do, aside for everybody, but you got to know, you got to be in tune with the culture, and you got to know when somebody is operating outside of that culture, or they're not respecting that culture. You got to be the guy to help police and regulate that. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to Quinn Ewers in that role. I think he's not a natural vocal leader. I think he's all but admitted that, but he's been working on it, and we've seen him come out of his shell while he's been playing. Like, we've seen him get fiery. We've seen him on the sidelines talking to guys. So, and this is a guy that we at first, people thought he was too lethargic. They thought he was too kind of lackadaisical. It's like, man, he needs to. It looks like sometimes he's out there and he's not as focused as he should be. It doesn't seem like he has the intensity that he needs. But we've seen all that get better. Body language is big when you're a quarterback. I think he realized that. Everybody's watching your body language as a QB. Nick Saban would talk about that often. Like, man, you can't have bad body language. When he said that he told Mac Jones this when Mac Jones was, before he became the starting quarterback. So Sark was probably here when he said this. He said, I can tell by watching you, not even looking at the play or the result of it. I can tell by watching you what the result of the play was. I can tell if it was an incompletion. I can tell if the wide receiver screwed up. I can tell if it was a big play. He said, as a quote, as a quarterback, you have to be aware of your demeanor and the way your body language speaks to people and other people. And I think, Quinn's becoming aware of all those little things.
Hey, by the way, I've always said a quarterback is like being the GM of the football team. There's the GM of the football program is Sarkisian. Quinn's the GM of the team. Your leader's the GM of your team, right? To your point, Rod, you have to have multiple relationships with everybody. You have to understand every room and your room, right? You have to have it all here.
That's real.
You're the GM of your team if you're the quarterback.
Hey, that's probably one of the biggest question marks NFL GMs have for Quinn right now. We expect him to take another step forward in his development for the NFL, but that leads us to exactly where we want to talk about is the NFL, because the NFL Combine is coming up. I wanted to, let's see, I hope I shared this correctly. Yeah, the NFL drafts, we'll be talking about, the 11 Longhorns that are going to the Combine this year. Yeah. I hope I know how to make this smaller. Bear with me a little bit, but there's 11 Longhorns going. And Rod, you talked about the rankings that Zerline over at NFL.com has been able to pop up recently. Who could be the biggest riser from the Combine in your eyes?
Oh, man, I think there are a few guys. That's why I'm so pumped about this group, man. First of all, I think both D tackles are going to improve their draft stock. You already got Jim Nagy, the executive of the Senior Bowl, saying T'Vondre Sweat shouldn't drop out of the first round. Like, just that simple. That guy shouldn't drop out of the first round. We know Byron Murphy is going to be drafted first round, but then you got people saying that Byron Murphy is going to go to the Combine and put on the show. That he's got those type of physical traits that as a D lineman, he's going to go there potentially and put on the show. And his draft stock is already increasing by people going back watching the film. I talked about, D tackles overall. Half of the highest paid defenders last year in the NFL were interior D linemen guys. That's because those guys are becoming highly valued when teams are playing lighter boxes, playing with two deep safeties, and they need guys that can clog gaps and demand double teams. Texas got two of them in different ways with T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. Jonathan Brooks, I really, man, if his medical evaluations go well, which I expect him to, he's not going to work out. I think he's going to interview really well. I mean, that guy's draft stock is actually increasing with him being hurt, in my opinion. He's still the number one running back. Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah, Matt Miller. You name a really, I believe he's the number one running back right here for Lance Zierlein too. Pro Football Focus. Everybody got him at the top running back on the board. Now, maybe it's a weak running back class. And you know what? That helps him. It is a weak running back class.
Helps an injured running back, right?
Exactly. It's going to push him up. So.
Rod, it's almost like being a high school prospect now. You go play in an all-star game and your ranking drops. It's actually the tape is so good for Brooks this year.
Oh,
hey, I'm in a pretty good spot here, guys. I'm just letting you know.
And the storyline helps him out too, guys, because everybody assumed there would be regression in Texas running game. Even myself, I'll put my hand up when you lost Bijan and Rojo. And the truth is, it was negligible. I mean, if there was any regression at all, that's how good that guy was. That helps him a ton because there are a lot of people looking at that part of it that, hey, man, that guy carried the running game even when he wasn't even and named starter initially. His story is so damn good. I think it helps.
Hey, there's one guy on this list.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I was to say Xavier Worthy, Rod. I want your thoughts on this. You know what's going to be big for them? Gauntlet drill.
Xavier Worthy?
Yep, because what do people question? Hands.
That's true.
If he
Matt
tears
Miller brought that up, right?
Watch what happens.
Yeah, Matt Miller brought that up. He said he thinks it's overblown. His reason was it was overblown because first of all, Xavier had the hand injury 2 years ago, and he thought this year he remedied those issues and didn't have the drop issues this year. So when they go back to the film, that they'll see that, you know what, actually the hands are not that big of an issue. But this is a silly season, the scouting season, and they look for reasons not to draft you. Boom. So he's got to go there and prove that. He's also got to go. Listen, he's going to run a fast time. There's no doubt about that. But when you have those slight receivers that are slight like Xavier Worthy is, I wonder if, there are some NFL teams that just don't like those types of receivers. They prefer receivers with more bulk, more mass that are a little bit bigger. But I think that's a little bit of fool's gold. That's a little bit of a miscalculation. I think those guys, depending on the play style, those guys can play in the NFL at a high level. It may actually push him down the draft though, just because fewer teams may be interested, because of the size.
And I'm leaning and workshopping a take right now, but the longer that this offseason and NFL Combine and draft prep season has continued, the more I think Ryan Watts ends up drafted.
Oh, nice.
Like,
I think
there's a couple things here.
Yeah.
If he can test somewhere, if he can run a 4.55 or lower, I think that'll be enough for him to get drafted. It's not a great, the depth we've talked about it, Rod. NIL is affecting how many players enter the draft and how many draft eligible players there are in the back end of a draft.
Yeah.
For a year like that, I think that was a big reason why he ended up entering the draft rather than coming back for another year or even transferring to kind of boost what was a bit of a shaky end to his year in career at Texas. But if he can run 4.55, the biggest question mark with Ryan Watts is get off. Can he burst and can he accelerate? What's he been doing this entire offseason since that Washington game? I bet it's been training for the 40 because he does have great elite top-end speed. It's all about the get off, and that 10-yard burst is going to be huge whenever they talk about his combine measurables because a 6'3" cornerback or defensive back that can run somewhere in the 4.5s, they'll take that. An extra inch in wingspan and height at the cornerback spot is about 0.07, 0.08 of a 40 time for most of those NFL franchises. I think he might be a guy that sneaks in late.
I'll tell you why I agree with that is when Sark said he could have 10 guys drafted this year, you know what I think he was really leaning on there is the bottom of the draft not quite as strong because guys are staying the extra year in college for NIL.
Yep.
And I think that Keelan Robinson, Ryan Watts, I think that puts those guys in a draftable position instead of a free agent position. And I think that's why Sark's really leaning into 10 guys being drafted versus 8. He knows that.
You know who probably leaves without NIL is Jahdae Barron and Alfred Collins. Those are guys who have been around. They have a lot of tape.
And what does that mean? That knocks Watts and Keelan's draft spot out if it comes down to those 4 guys getting drafted, right? So that's
absolutely.
That's the point. I mean, right there.
And I agree with you, CJ, about I love your take on Ryan Watts. I'll just add to this because I'll just kind of piggyback on it. Teams now may be more willing to invest in developmental projects like Ryan Watts because they can put more guys on the practice squad and they can put them there for longer. And so now you can put a guy like, no, I want him to just work at safety for a year. Just see, practice. He'll be our practice squad guy, give us good looks, and then you can transition. So back in my day, you really couldn't afford to do that. Practice squad was just more about being able to, you couldn't really develop guys there. It's more like hiding players on the practice squad that you wanted potentially to bring up on your active roster at one time. Now you actually can use it to develop players on the practice squad.
And I know it's a little bit out of the conversation here, but the NFL cap did just run up to about $250 million today. So about a $30 million increase per year per team, obviously, from what we've seen this past year. That'll be interesting. But man, I mean, the combines this weekend, spring football is within 25 days. There's a lot of excitement here, and we're going to have you all covered over on Texas Football and here on the YouTube channel as well. But that'll about do it for today. Rod, Jerry, y'all got any last final words here?
No,
I'm gonna celebrate belated Margarita Day. So
I'm going to the Rockets Suns game tonight, taking my son. It's his 18th birthday tomorrow. So what better way to celebrate a birthday than going to watch KD and Booker combine for about 65 tonight in the Toyota Center.
Nice.
Happy birthday. After the beatdown Luka gave him last night. So
exactly. He had a good fantasy night with Luka last night. I will say that.
MVP. He's my MVP.
Yes, he is.
But hey,
he's gonna win MVP. I agree with that.
Well, that's enough NBA talk. I know y'all log in here to hear us talk
about.
We're
not going to break down the All-Star game or what?
There's too much defense in it for me. I'm going to be honest. But perfect. That'll about do it for today. I really appreciate all y'all, spending your Friday afternoons. Hopefully y'all accomplish some work today. I know that it's a beautiful day out here in Austin. I'm going to go see the sunshine for the first time this week. So that'll be fun for me. But until then, go ahead, check us out on Texas Football. Hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll be back Sunday night for the Longhorn Livestream. Welcome.